empowers children and young people to understand the steps they can take to reduce their risks, increase their resilience to mental health problems, and improve their mental health.
Our vision is to create a world with a sound mental health for all.
People do attempt suicide.
Naturally, people are born to judge. But judging and expressing the judgment is something that we can reserve for ourselves.
We find that suicide bereavement is even more difficult than losing someone through natural death.
Be empathetic in the way you approach their situation. Because if you show too much sympathy, they'll also start feeling guilty.
Greetings to you all. Welcome to our show, Tap In. Hello everyone, welcome to our show, Tap In. I'm your host, Tawanda Mrepa, and I'm the director and founder of Young People Mental Health Trust. Today we are going to discuss about addictions and substance abuse. And in studio with me, I have our guests, and they're going to introduce themselves.
My name is Brighton Mfakwadzi. I'm a mental health occupational therapist at the Ministry of Health and Childcare. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nyasha Ashneem Kosela. I'm the Citizen Presentation Departmental Leader at Young People Mental Health Trust.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll start to ask you, what do you understand by the term addiction?
Thank you very much. So I'll try to keep it in very simple terms. So I'll first highlight on the common terms that we use. There is addiction, there is dependency. So those terms, they are now used interchangeably. However, we have classification documents, or what we refer to as reference documents, the DSM-5 and the ICD-11. So there are key, very important components that I should talk about when it comes to the issue of dependency. So there's what we call physical dependency, and then there's what we call psychological dependency. So psychological dependence, it's your habitual thinking that you have a habit, that you take a substance now and then. So your mind consciously reminds you that you have a substance that you take. But when we talk of physical dependence, we're talking about your body would have made adaptations to adjust itself to the particular substance that you're now taking. So that's why people end up having withdrawals, they end up having cravings. It's because your body would have made neuroadaptive changes and developed a receptor site system for that particular substance. So if you do not take that substance for a given period of time, the body actually has a feedback system that reminds you that you have not taken your substance of choice, hence the withdrawals. Thank you.
Okay, Ajine, do you have anything to add on your own understanding? What is addiction?
Okay, thank you. Addiction is excessive use or uncontrollable use of drugs. They may include illegal drugs like marijuana, cocaine, glue, to mention a few.
Okay, so what do you think causes addiction? What do you think are the causes of addiction?
Addiction. I'll first talk about the physiological nature of us as human beings. I'll also talk about the aspects or the important concept of tolerance. What causes addiction initially is your body has got what is called a reward system. A reward system is a neurophysiological response that you have. That if you naturally, when you do something that is important for your survival, your body actually produces neurotransmitters that reward you, that gives you a feel-good sensation that you have done something good for survival. So what drugs do, they mimic that neurophysiological process, the reward system. So let's say we have what are called endorphins and dopamine. So what happens when you take, let's take for instance, cocaine. If you take cocaine, it more than 15-fold or 15 times more produces those neurotransmitters. So it's more of like a substance has mimicked a natural neurophysiological process. So once that has happened, the body now creates adaptation. Those adaptations, it has now gotten used to this new substance that's getting into your body. So if it creates adaptations, it means that at a neurological level, it creates synapses, it creates receptors for that new substance that you've introduced. So once it is newly introduced and the body has created adaptations, the body now reminds you that you have taken a particular substance. We now need it in the system. That's when we refer to someone as being dependent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned something to do with the physical and the neurological aspect of it, and also the issue to do with and the hormones and stuff. So, is there any likelihood that some people might easily get into addictions? Actually, do you believe there's a speed, like is there a likelihood that someone would easily get into addiction?
Yes, peer pressure, environmental factors, or they can be talking to each other. That drugs will make you feel better. Drugs can relieve stress. Drugs can relieve when you're depressed. You can take drugs. Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay. Do you have anything to add on that?
I think one thing that we have to be cognizant of is addiction is different on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Why? Because our bodies are different. So our bodies are different in the fact that our makeup, one person might not get dependent on a substance. The other person might be dependent on that substance. And then we have to also talk about the genetic factors. I want to talk about this issue because I want to make reference. There are a lot of families out there. There are certain terms which are used by people like It means that they don't have that particular enzyme that digests the alcohol faster than the other family. So there's a genetic component to it. So when we talk about substances, let me take, for instance, the alcohol use in Zimbabwe. About 39% of adults in Zimbabwe would have used alcohol for the last 12 months.
Okay.
But out of all that 39%, the likelihood of someone developing neuroadaptative changes so that they get addicted to the alcohol is 10 to 13%. So those are the people, when they withdraw from alcohol, they start having the delirium tremens, all those physiological signs that show that they are now withdrawing from that substance. So the two most important components that you should talk about is what is called withdrawal and what is called tolerance.
Okay.
Tolerance, this is the downside of our physiology. When you take a substance, your body develops tolerance. Like, let me take, for instance, if someone is used to taking one twist of magic, the previous effect that they had, they now need more and more of those twists to reach the previously desired effect. Like if someone used to get high on a single pint of alcohol, now they need about 10 pints of alcohol. That's what we call tolerance. Then someone will be telling you, now I now drink the whole crate. It means now that bit by bit, your body is getting adapted to more and more volumes of that substance. So you now need more to reach the previously desired effect. I want to talk about a very important concept that usually patients actually encounter, especially during the progression of use. There is what we call OD, overdose.
Okay.
So this concept comes along because when someone is now addicted or dependent on a substance, their tolerance or their threshold becomes higher and higher. They now need more and more till their body crashes. So it's important that we are cognizant of that tolerance, it always picks up. And also there are changes that happens within our bodies that predisposes us to overdose. Thank you.
Okay. So you mentioned to do with the genetics and also the different reaction within our body. So how common is addiction? Actually, how common is it?
In Zimbabwe, it is estimated that 90% of people use drugs. Of young people, they use drugs. And also, these drugs are causing a lot of diseases. These drugs are causing psychological problems such as schizophrenia and your life can change. For example, you may not be able to control your life in terms of your social life, school, work. You will not be able to control. those drugs will be controlling your life. You yourself, you will not be the one who believe it, because everything is now being controlled by those use of drugs.
Okay. To add on, how common is addiction to the drug users or to those who are substance dependent? How common is it?
I think we have various drug classifications, and usage sometimes it depends with the socio-economic stratification. Like if you're a low-income earning country, there are drugs which are typical of a low-income earning country. Middle class level, higher upper class level, there are drugs there that are also appropriate to that. So in terms of dependence, it varies from drug to drug.
Okay.
According to the classification, I would want to agree with you that it's quite very rampant in Zimbabwe. We have not fully comprehended or done adequate surveys and research to actually establish at what level has this worsened to. But it's quite rampant. And in Zimbabwe, we have, I want to make reference to Mtoriro, which is a crystal methamphetamine. This is a cheap version of a stimulant. So by virtue of it being available in streets and by peddlers in high density areas, this has become a drug of concern as of late. And it's not only a pandemic limited to Africa, even internationally, especially considering what we're dealing with lockdowns during the COVID-19 era. So the problem, research is not fully ascertained to what extent we have this problem, but it's a major cause for concern.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so and now, what are the other life-changing complications associated with addictions? Starting with you, Ashine, what are the other life-changing complications associated with addictions?
There are so many life-changing. For example, you will not be able to cope with your peers. You will have social problems with people. You will not be able to socialize. You'll be just alone because you are always high. Your mind is now distorted. You can't differentiate between what's real and what's not real. So you can isolate yourself. You're now having social problems. You may have financial problems because you now use all of your money. You now use everything, even if you don't have. You make sure that everything goes to drugs. So now you suffer financial problems and you won't be financially stable because everything is going to drugs. And also psychological problems. You may have, like I mentioned earlier, disorders like schizophrenia. So yeah, those are the life-changing.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We have a lot of life-changing complications associated with the substance abuse. Like she said, some others are also due to the illegal consequences. You might get arrested, and also you might also not be able to go to work. And there are also issues to do with the marital issues. There are always problems at home, problems at family. So those are associated with substance abuse. So now, is there any difference between addictions and dependence, do you say?
I think those terms, they're used interchangeably. The most important thing is actually being able to distinguish at what level is your dependence. Is it psychological dependence? Is it physical dependence? So when you have physical dependence, the most important thing that you should be cognizant of is, are you withdrawing from the substance of choice? If you have gone for days without taking that substance, is your body telling you that there's something that you miss? So that's the aspect of physical dependence that you should be worried about. And that's what pushes people from taking one dose after the other, because they can't stop now. They're caught in a cycle. Whenever they want to stop, their body reminds them that they need to take that substance. So those are the very important. It's not really about the terms per se. It's really about understanding the concepts, so that if someone has developed this level of dependence, what are the interventions necessary?
Okay.
Where the sticking point is, maybe taking it from a perspective of a clinician like myself. The intervention methods for someone who would have developed physical dependence. sometimes some drugs you get hooked on the first dose. Let's look at opioids like heroin. That's why they use them in prostitution rings. That's if they give you the first dose for free, they know next time you come back, you're not hooked. So habitually you're now a slave of those drugs.
Exactly.
So interventions, they become more complex with the level of dependence that would have developed. So those two concepts, be able to distinguish the psychological, the physical,
and the physical
aspect.
one. Okay. So now, how then can we recognize the symptoms of drug addictions and dependence? Back to you, Ajay. Okay, you say, do you have anything to say? How then can you recognize the symptom of drug dependence and addictions?
I think first point that I would like to talk about is the social cultural background that we have. How is this issue perceived? So that we were able to establish intervention methods. How does the community perceive drug issues? Later on, let's talk about mental health in general. Mental health issues have always been a taboo in our communities. People have not openly discussed them. So that kind of mindset has been transferred to the issues pertaining to drug use. So it's very important that social culture, the same way that parents discuss reproductive health issues with their children, is the same way they should openly discuss drug use issues. So that's why sometimes interventions are difficult, because there are no interventions that are family-based, that are meant to nip this problem in the bud at a community level. So I think it's strongly important that we start mass public campaigns in terms of trying to educate communities and stimulate cultural changes that are important, although they might take time, but that are important for people to start recognizing this problem, start discussing this problem. Then also going at a personal level, I think it's important there are what we call preventative measures that we take as a ministry, of what we call primary preventative measures, secondary preventative measures, and tertiary preventative measures. So the primary preventative measures are meant to discourage the youth from starting this habit. So initially, we discourage people from starting this habit. Or secondly, as part of primary intervention, we try to delay onset. Because there is always a high likelihood that if someone starts drug use at an earlier age, the likelihood of them becoming an addict or dependent at a later age, they're twofold or threefold compared to someone who would have started a bit later on. So that's the primary preventative aspect. So we'll move on to secondary preventative aspect, where we're recognizing that someone has started using that substance. It might be alcohol, it might be legal substance, it might be an illicit substance. So after they would have started using that substance, we don't want that person to further deteriorate and develop a disorder.
Okay.
So that's a lot of concepts come in here. That's where we use even harm reduction interventions. Harm reduction interventions, we're talking about there's someone who is using. At the moment, we can't make them stop. But let's put intervention to reduce the short-term implication, the medium-term implication, the long-term implication, while averting all the other consequences while at least that person is using. So also when you talk about at the secondary level, we're also looking at issues like supply reduction. This is more of an enforcement aspect, that the law enforcement aspect is to actually make sure that its operations curb the drugs from getting into communities.
Okay.
And then we also do what is called the demand reduction. Like what we're doing now, we're talking to people, we're talking to communities. We are lessening the desire of communities in partaking in these illicit substances. Then at tertiary care level, most people are always happy to people say, drug rehabs are very expensive. They're expensive. Why? Because that's specialist care. There are now a lot of specialists who are coming to manage someone who have developed a disorder. So care at a tertiary level is more expensive. It's cheaper at a primary preventative level. So we encourage people, let's not start these habits, because right now there are certain substances that you take. If you take them, you get hooked on the first hit. So let's strongly discourage youth, let's strongly discourage students from experimentation.
Okay, all right, thank you. So now, Ajine, you mentioned something to do with depression, to do with the schizophrenia. So my question is, why do conditions occur together? Why do conditions occur together? Let's say someone is suffering from mental health problems and they end up using substance abuse. why is it so?
The use of these drugs, they will lead to those migraine, to those psychological problems. Because now it's in your mind, you think you can't live without drugs. You think you cannot do anything without drugs, but you're damaging yourself. But you're the one damaging your mind slowly. Then at the end, you develop psychological problems. You can't control now your life. You can't differentiate what's real and what's not true.
Okay, I think you basing on the schizophrenia part, I think there's something to do with it, but basing also on the depression and anxiety, we find out some other people, especially young people, they're trying to hide through using substance abuse, and then later on they end up hooked within the substances. Do you have anything to add regarding that? Why do conditions occur together, especially in some schizophrenia and other mental health disorders and problems?
Okay, I'll talk about what are called comorbidities, as in conditions coexisting together. So we have classifications of mental health conditions. Like you have said, we have psychotic disorders, we have like schizophrenia that you have mentioned. So we have a wide range of psychotic and neurotic disorders. So however, some people, they are born with disorders. Some people are genetically predisposed to disorders. Some people develop disorders. That's how mental health disorders work. So however, people may use substances and alcohol to medicate their disorders. Let me talk about anxiety disorders. It's a broader range of disorders. So this is state of apprehension, state of, how can I put it in simple terms? Apprehension, state of being worried that persists for a period and that causes dysfunction in your activities of daily living. So common morbidities is more of like sometimes someone may use drugs to self-medicate or treat themselves over a problem that they can't solve or that they don't have intervention for.
Okay.
So you find that sometimes most men, anxiety disorders are quite common in men. So alcohol is a depressant. So if I take alcohol, it's sort of like somehow dampens the anxiety disorder. So sometimes the substances they may use to medicate. Then also primarily is the primary cause of problem. Substances may cause the development of psychotic disorders.
Okay.
So it works in either way.
Okay, I think to cut it there, is it a good idea for someone to use their substances as a medication?
It's never a good idea.
I think we should highlight that.
People should know that. So there's a lot of things that people mask. People mask a lot of things. They mask trauma. They mask a lot of things. That's one thing about people. They mask things. They bottle up things. Especially with our African culture, we belong to in patriarchal society when men are supposed to toughen up. So men mask a lot of things, and then so as to help with the masking, they take these substances to dampen down the effect of their problems. Yet that's not the solution. People should open up about issues, seek appropriate interventions for their problems. So we strongly discourage the use of illicit drugs, the use of alcohol to manage anxiety disorders or to self-medicate yourself. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you for highlighting that one because it's a major issue that we should talk about. People are using substance abuse for treating their mental health problems, which is a no-no. Seek counselors, seek counseling, seek psychologists, seek therapists. They can help you to deal with whatever you are going through mentally, not substance abuse. Ajini, you have something to add?
Yes, to add one, I agree with both of you. Some people think they will be helping themselves, don't know they will be damaging themselves. For example, you are depressed, you take Mutoriro. Most young people, they are taking Mutoriro or cocaine or to lower your depression or anxiety or anything. But then you do not know that at the end, your problems will still be there. Nothing will be solved. It's better to talk to someone, a professional counselor, a professional therapist, not to solve it yourself. Because at the end of the day, You take drugs, you want to solve a problem, you think it's going to work. No, you're damaging yourself. You're damaging yourself physically. You now develop severe cirrhosis. What good have you done to yourself? You have damaged yourself rather than doing good to yourself.
Okay, thank you for highlighting that one. Now, how then do we manage the dual diagnosis? Someone is suffering from mental disorders, and now they are using substance abuse at the same time. How then can we manage those problems, the dual diagnosis?
There are different ways of managing,
Mm.
quite a lot. And first of all, let's start it at a primary preventative level that we are imparting information to communities.
Mm.
We should encourage people to be aware of their mental health state
Mm.
so that they do not mask it or they do not start creating solutions that are not going to eventually solve the problem. So the first and foremost important thing is raise mental health awareness so that those underlying conditions do not go undiagnosed.
Mhm.
They are diagnosed, and after diagnosis, proper interventions are employed.
Mhm.
As far as substance use is concerned, there are a lot of conditions that prevail in communities that are yet to be established.
Mhm.
And some people might find themselves with high affinity for these drugs, yet they are now using it to mask a particular problem.
Mm.
So we encourage people to go for interventions, go for basic assessment, know basic tools of screening. If they are depressed,
Mm.
what's the scoring for depression? People should learn these things or even incorporating it in curriculum so that
Mhm. Mhm.
people are able to self-diagnose. After
Mm.
self-diagnosis, people should know where to get appropriate help
Mm.
before they embark on a destructive path of using illicit substances to actually medicate themselves. So that's how we can best split those two problems. But at the same time, if it's co-occurring and the problem is already established, specialist intervention is needed.
Mhm.
In specialist intervention, there should be directories,
Mm.
there should be mapping of service providers, directories created so that people know in communities where's the next port of call I can go and get help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for highlighting those issues. Especially people should know the channel, especially where to get information. We should actually create a directory whereby people should, okay, so what next in terms of the prevention, in terms of the diagnosis, in terms of whatever in treatment of substance abuse. So now to wrap up, do you have anything to say to our audience? Okay.
I have
Just
quite
to
a
wrap up.
lot to say to the audience. I don't know if our time will allow us. There is quite a lot of issues that happen, and most of them are misconceptions and misunderstandings. Let's debunk myths. There are a lot of myths, there are a lot of mysteries, there are a lot of conspiracies which are created in communities. That Mbanje gives you a lot of energy. Things like that. People sort of like glorify the substance use in communities. And a lot of myths are created to glorify these substances. And there's the urban culture that's now there, especially when it comes to the musicians, the new
Exactly.
crop of musicians. And now we have this typical lingo that sort of like glorifies drug use. So it's perceived as being cool when you use drugs. But the ultimate result is not really shown on screen. But there are dire consequences to use of drugs. So I think besides the social cultural issues, the myths, the glorification of drugs, there are a lot of things that we should encourage young people. That especially now, generations are different and societies are evolving. Old generations, they used to be exposed to cannabis. They used to be exposed to alcohol. A few select substances were available for that group. But unfortunately for now, there's a diverse, lots and lots of different types of drugs that are now available. So there's a buffet of drugs to choose from. And some of these drugs are lab synthetics. Once you hit them the first time, they cause changes in your brain and the recovery becomes very difficult. So the key word, especially when it comes to use of these days, discourage to experiment. Don't just experiment with anything. And at our homesteads, let's look out for what we call paraphernalia. These are telltale signs at the homestead. Like you find a bent out, what do they call the barubu, the little barubu, that one. You find it lying somewhere in your household. Then that probably means someone is using it. So they are now using drugs with a lot of paraphernalia. So us as guardians, us as parents, let's look out for these telltale signs. So if you see a paraphernalia lying idle, the barubu, you see a mushroom all over, there's likelihood that the youths are using them. And some of these drugs, they cause quite a lot of dysfunction. Someone might not go to sleep for 5 to 6 days. Physiologically, that's a disaster because your body will crash. So these other drugs that are coming up now, don't experiment with them. No matter how fancy they are, let's try to discourage them. And also, let's have a way of people to open up. Let's have systems where people can actually go and open up. And then also, one last important message that I would like to articulate is the training for judicial officers. The law, the punitive measures that the law takes on the drug users. So we have to weigh the pros and cons of our judicial system. Is it causing people to refrain from opening up? And then, so we should find what is called alternative ways of rehabilitating those offenders or those people who have been caught with the drugs. So that if you use punitive measures, people desist from opening up. So I think there should be more of like, I don't know what they call it in law terms, called diversion of like, if someone is found with a small amount of substances, there should be a variety of options that the law officers should have besides reprimanding, so that people get the actual help that they need. And also, our law enforcement system should be very, very dynamic, so that it busts the drug syndicates. And it has to change with how dynamic the drug world is changing. So there are quite a lot of interventions that would have gone on. I need about 3 programs to go on and on about what we should do. But there is no one solution fits all. We have to create a lot of solutions. And instead of trying to force people to use one solution. That's where the crisis is with drug issues. We think there's one model that fits. No, let's create hundreds of models so that there's a particular model that's suitable for different kind of people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ashni, do you have anything to sum up?
Okay. All right, to you viewers, especially young people out there, my concern is that we are the future of Zimbabwe. We are the one with energy. So don't experiment. Don't start things you cannot end. Don't allow yourself to be surrounded by negative people who tell you to use drugs and or stay away from drugs. They are not even good at all. They destroy your future. Imagine a future of Zimbabwe with people whose minds are not well. It's creating havoc. Look at the streets of Zimbabwe. Look at the people who are using Toriro and O. Look at them. Do they have a future? No. We are the future of Zimbabwe. We are the future of tomorrow. So let's be organized. Let's be responsible with our lives, young people.
Oh, okay. What a touching, yeah. So young people, it's time for us to be serious with our life. You heard it from our guest today. They highlighted issues to do with addiction and substance abuse. So addiction is real. Yes, addiction is real. It's there. It's up to you now to take care of yourself. Don't experiment. Take care of yourself. Do the usual things that we used to do, not substance abuse. We are fighting the 2 serious problems at the moment here in Zimbabwe right now. The first one, COVID-19, is real. Mask up, social distance, pay all to the WHO regulations, stay at home, avoid unnecessary movement. Number 2, substance abuse. Substance abuse is taking a lot from us as young people. It's taking a lot from us as a nation of Zimbabwe. It's a serious topic. It needs you and me to be seriously involved in a no-free substance abuse environment. It is possible, yes. with you and with me. So let us take care of ourselves. Let us take care of our loved ones. So to close our show today, we will meet again next week as we'll be discussing more about support and recovery of substance abuse. Thank you so much.